Did you know that Japan's story began thousands of years before it was ever called Japan? Archaeologists call them the Jomon people, and they left behind some of the world's oldest pottery, decorated with beautiful rope-like patterns. Their lives were simple, peaceful, and deeply connected to nature. But this quiet existence wouldn't last. Around 300 BC, new people arrived from the Asian mainland, bringing rice farming, iron tools, and weaving. These newcomers merged with the Jomon, creating the Yayoi culture. For the first time, villages grew into communities, and communities into powerful clans. By the 3rd century, one clan stood above the rest, the Yamato clan. Their rulers claimed they were descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu, establishing an imperial line that, believe it or not, still exists today. These early emperors were more like spiritual guides, uniting people through shared myths and faith. Eager to learn, Japan sent emissaries to the powerful Chinese dynasties. They brought back writing, new ideas about government, and a new religion, Buddhism. But instead of replacing Japan's native belief, Shinto, the two blended together in harmony. You can still see this today, with Buddhist temples standing right next to Shinto shrines. By the 7th century, inspired by China's Tang dynasty, Japan became a centralized state. Leaders like Prince Shotoku introduced a constitution promoting moral governance and unity. Nara became the first real capital, a grand city modeled after China's own, with the Great Buddha of Nara as a symbol of national pride. But power is always shifting. In the late 700s, the imperial court moved to a new capital, Heian-kyo, which we now know as Kyoto. This kicked off the Heian period, an incredible age of art, poetry, and elegance. Court nobles lived in a world of silk robes and beautiful gardens, and literature flourished. In fact, what's often called the world's first novel, The Tale of Genji, was written during this time. But while the court was focused on beauty and refinement, a new power was rising in the provinces. Local lords called daimyo began to build their own private armies of skilled warriors. From these armies, a new class emerged that would define Japan for the next 700 years. The samurai. Honor, loyalty, and discipline became their unbreakable code, later known as Bushido. To die with honor was better than to live with shame. By the 12th century, this new warrior class was ready to take control. The two most powerful clans, the Minamoto and the Taira, fought a bitter war for dominance. In the end, Minamoto no Yoritomo was victorious. He established Japan's first shogunate, a military government led by the shogun. The emperor remained a symbolic figure, but real power now belonged to the warriors. Japan had entered an age where the sword, not the scroll, determined its destiny. This new military government soon faced its greatest test. The samurai fought with incredible bravery, but they were outnumbered. Just when all seemed lost, a massive storm struck, wrecking the Mongol fleet and forcing them to retreat. 7 years later, the Mongols returned with an even bigger army. The Japanese had built stone walls and prepared for a desperate defense. For weeks, they fought brutal battles. And then, it happened again. Another massive typhoon, which the Japanese called kamikaze or divine wind, completely obliterated the Mongol fleet. To them, it was proof that the gods were protecting their sacred land. But victory came at a cost. The shogunate had spent everything on defense and couldn't reward its warriors. Discontent grew, and soon Japan was torn apart by civil war. Out of this chaos, a new shogunate, the Ashikaga clan, rose to power. This period, known as the Muromachi period, was a time of both conflict and incredible cultural brilliance. Zen Buddhism deeply influenced art and philosophy, giving us the simple beauty of sand gardens, ink-wash paintings, and the tea ceremony. But peace didn't last. By the 15th century, the shogun's power had faded, and Japan descended into the Sengoku or Warring States period. For over 100 years, warlords fought for control, alliances shifted overnight, and ambition was the only law. From this chaos, three legendary figures emerged to unify the nation. First was Oda Nobunaga, a ruthless but brilliant leader who revolutionized warfare. After his death, his general Toyotomi Hideyoshi continued the unification. But it was the third man, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who would finally bring lasting peace. In 1600, his victory at the Battle of Sekigahara established the Tokugawa shogunate, which would rule for over 250 years. This was the Edo period. The capital moved to Edo, which we now call Tokyo. Society was strictly ordered, with the samurai at the top. Most importantly, Japan closed itself off from the rest of the world. For more than 2 centuries, it was a world unto itself, developing a unique and vibrant culture. Art, theater, and literature flourished. But while Japan was in isolation, the outside world was changing fast. In 1853, American warships, led by Commodore Matthew Perry, sailed into Edo Bay and demanded that Japan open for trade. Faced with overwhelming force, Japan had no choice. The centuries of isolation were over. The shock was immense. The old shogunate collapsed, and in 1868, power was restored to the emperor in what's known as the Meiji Restoration. Japan transformed at a breathtaking pace. In just a few decades, it went from a feudal society to a modern industrial power. The samurai class was gone, but their spirit of discipline and resilience lived on. By the early 20th century, Japan had become a major world power. But its imperial ambitions led to conflict and, ultimately, to the devastation of World War II. After its surrender, Japan was in ruins. Yet, from those ashes, Japan rose again. Not through military conquest, but through innovation, hard work, and determination. In just a generation, it became a global leader in technology and design. Today, Japan is a place where ancient traditions and futuristic dreams live side by side, a nation that has constantly reinvented itself. From the clay pots of the Jomon to the neon lights of Tokyo, Japan's history is a powerful story of adaptation and resilience. A nation that has fallen and risen, each time stronger and more enduring than before. What part of Japan's history fascinates you the most? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that bring history to life.